The dense foliage of Zalera Prime rustled under the heavy, humid air as Jake maneuvered through the underbrush with practiced ease. His boots sank slightly into the soft, rich soil, leaving human footprints on a planet light years from Earth. The bioscanner in his hand beeped intermittently, picking up various life forms that called this lush planet home. Suddenly, the scanner's steady beep escalated into a rapid alarm. Something large was nearby. Jake paused, his hand instinctively going to the blaster holstered at his side. Through the dense leaves, a figure stumbled, its movements heavy and erratic. As the figure broke through the underbrush, Jake's finger tightened on the blaster, but he hesitated. It wasn't one of the hostile fauna of Zalera Prime. It was an alien, humanoid, and strikingly frail-looking. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent quality that caught the sunlight, casting prismatic colors on the ground around her. "Easy there," Jake called out, lowering his weapon. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien, her eyes wide and alert, froze, staring at him with a mixture of fear and confusion. She was dressed in what appeared to be a flight suit, adapted perhaps for space travel, and it was torn in several places as if she had encountered some violence among the wilderness. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice carrying a musical quality, albeit strained. "I'm Jake. I'm an explorer, not a threat." He took a slow step towards her, hands raised to show he meant no harm. "Looks like you could use some help." She studied him for a moment longer before her knees buckled slightly, the strain of her ordeal catching up to her. Jake moved forward instinctively to support her, his hand gripping her arm gently. "My ship? I had to make an emergency landing. It's damaged beyond my capability to repair alone," she explained, her breathing labored. "Let's get you to my camp," Jake suggested. "It's not far. You can rest, and we'll figure out what to do about your ship." The alien nodded weakly, and together, they made their way through the alien landscape. As they walked, Jake tried to make light conversation, attempting to ease the palpable tension. "So, what's your name?" he asked. "Arya," she replied. "From the constellation you call the Harp. I'm a researcher." "Never met anyone from there before," Jake said with a smile. "What were you researching?" "Flora and fauna interactions on uninhabited worlds." But Arya paused, a frown crossing her delicate features. "Zalera Prime is hardly uninhabited, it seems." "No, it's got me for now," Jake chuckled. "And you, temporarily." Their conversation was interrupted as they arrived at a clearing where Jake's camp was set up. It consisted of a small, high-tech tent and various pieces of equipment scattered around, all powered by a compact solar generator. "This is it," Jake announced, helping Arya sit down on a makeshift seat by the camp. "You can rest here. I'll get you something to eat and drink." Arya sank down gratefully, watching as Jake moved around the camp with an ease that spoke of his familiarity with survival in such environments. "Thank you, Jake," she said, her voice softening. I don't know what I expected, but not kindness." "Well, we humans have a few good traits," Jake replied with a grin, handing her a protein pack and a bottle of water. "Rest now. We'll sort everything out soon." As she ate, Arya watched this human, this unexpected ally, with a newfound curiosity. Her initial fear of torture at human hands slowly began to wane, replaced by a cautious sense of relief. Perhaps, on this strange and vibrant world, she could find not just assistance, but understanding. Jake busied himself around the camp, organizing his tools and checking the solar generators as Arya watched quietly from her seat. The sun was beginning its descent, casting elongated shadows across the ground and bathing the camp in a soft golden light. "Feeling any better?" Jake asked, glancing over his shoulder at Arya, who had finished the protein pack and was now sipping water slowly. "A bit, yes. Your food is different from what I'm used to," she replied, her tone tentative but curious. "Yeah, it's not exactly gourmet, but it keeps you going," Jake chuckled, sitting down across from her. "So, Arya, tell me about where you're from. What's it like?" Arya's eyes lit up, a flicker of excitement breaking through her earlier apprehension. "It's very different from here. More urban. Our cities cover entire continents. And the technology. We have advancements you might find quite primitive, or perhaps revolutionary. Sounds like you've got some stories to share, Jake said, genuinely interested. I've traveled a lot, but I've never been anywhere that sounds quite like that. Arya smiled, relaxing slightly. Perhaps I could show you some images, if my communicator still works. It was damaged, but maybe you could. I can take a look at it, Jake offered, extending his hand. I'm no expert on alien tech, but I've picked up a thing or two. Gratefully, Arya handed him a small, sleek device that looked surprisingly similar to human technology. Jake turned it over in his hands, examining the ports and screens. I might have a few tools that can help with this. Let's see what we can do. As Jake retrieved his toolkit, Arya watched the human's movements. His openness and willingness to assist were unlike the stories she had been told of humans, aggressive and imperialistic. This man was different, or perhaps it was merely this one. You mentioned your people have a lot of misconceptions about humans, Jake said, his voice focused as he opened up the back of her communicator. What kind of things have they told you? Arya hesitated, choosing her words carefully. We are taught that humans are to be feared, that you conquer and destroy for your own gain. My decision to accept your help was not. It was not taken lightly. Jake nodded, understanding the gravity of her trust. We have similar stories about aliens, you know? It's why we're taught to defend ourselves first. But I've always thought, maybe we're more afraid of each other than we need to be. That's a hopeful way to see it, Arya replied, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. Here, Jake said after a moment, handing back her repaired communicator. Try it now. Arya powered on the device, and her face brightened as it lit up, functional once more. She quickly navigated to her image gallery, showing Jake pictures of her home, a world of silver cities and bright, neon skies. Wow, that's beautiful, Jake exclaimed, genuinely impressed. You built all that? My people did, Arya said, pride in her voice. Just as your people have explored and settled worlds far from your own. The evening passed with them sharing stories and images of their respective worlds. Jake showed Arya maps of human colonies and photos from other planets he'd visited. As the stars began to blanket the sky, a peaceful camaraderie settled between them, bridging the gap of their cultural differences with shared curiosity and newfound respect. Thanks for showing me all this, Arya, Jake said as they prepared to turn in for the night. I think we've got a lot to learn from each other. Yes, I believe we do, Arya agreed, her earlier fears allayed by the understanding they had fostered. As they settled into their respective quarters for the night, the alien and the human both felt a surprising sense of anticipation for what the next day would bring. The next morning, Jake was up early, starting a small fire to boil water for coffee. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, casting a warm glow that illuminated the campsite in a soft orange hue. Arya emerged from her tent, drawn by the familiar sound of a morning routine, albeit far from her own world. Good morning, Jake greeted her with a smile. Coffee? It's not exactly the gourmet stuff you might be used to, but it's got a kick. Good morning, Arya responded, accepting the steaming mug carefully. I've read about coffee in the human archives, but never tasted it. Jake watched amusedly as she took a cautious sip, her expression first curious, then pleasantly surprised. It's good, she admitted. Very robust. Jake chuckled. That's one way to put it. So, what's on the agenda for today? Any thoughts on what you want to do? Arya set her mug down, her mind shifting back to the more pressing matters. I need to gather data from various plant species here. The samples will help repair my ship's biosupport system. Sounds like a plan. I'll help you collect what you need, Jake offered, already grabbing some empty sample containers from his supply stash. Together, they ventured deeper into the lush underbrush of Zalera Prime. Arya pointed out the species she was interested in, and Jake helped her collect samples, careful to avoid damaging the delicate flora. Back home, I'm a botanist, Jake shared as he clipped a vibrant, feather-like leaf. Never thought I'd be applying my skills on another planet. Arya looked at him with newfound respect. You're full of surprises, Jake. My own training is in exobiology. Plants are just a hobby. As they worked, Jake's communicator beeped, a message from another human outpost on the planet seeking advice on a technical problem with their water purification system. Hold on a sec, Need to handle this, Jake said, tapping out a response. Arya watched, intrigued by how seamlessly he balanced his responsibilities. You seem to be crucial to your people here, she observed. Just part of being on a team, Jake replied with a shrug. We all look out for each other. Same as you would, I guess. Their conversation was cut short by a sudden rustling in the nearby bushes. Both tensed, but Jake signaled for calm. A moment later, a small creature, similar to a terrestrial rabbit but with glowing blue fur, hopped out. It's just a Therian hopper, Jake explained, seeing Arya's alarmed look. Harmless. They're all over the place. Arya relaxed, chuckling at her own reaction. On my planet, anything moving in the undergrowth is typically a predator. Well, not here. Most of the big predators avoid this area. Too much human activity, Jake explained, leading the way back to camp. Once they returned, they sorted through their collected samples, labeling and storing them properly. Jake set up a portable solar-powered scanner to analyze the samples for Arya's research. This should give us a good breakdown of the biocomponents and maybe help figure out how to fix your ship, Jake said, overseeing the scanning process. As they worked side by side, Arya felt a growing sense of camaraderie. The humans' kindness and competence were a far cry from the horror stories propagated by her people. You've been incredibly helpful, Jake, Arya said as they reviewed the data together. Thank you for not fitting the stereotype. Jake looked up, meeting her gaze with a warm, genuine smile. Happy to break the mold, Arya, and thank you for trusting me. As the day wound down, their successful collaboration had not only advanced Arya's mission, but had also deepened their mutual understanding and respect. The barriers of fear and prejudice, so easily built, were slowly being dismantled by the simple acts of sharing and cooperation. Tomorrow, let's see if we can patch up your communicator further. It might help you contact your ship, Jake suggested as they secured their findings. I'd like that, Arya agreed, feeling more hopeful and less isolated than she had since her unexpected arrival. The night settled over Zalera Prime, but for the first time, the darkness seemed less foreboding to Arya, with a human by her side. As the morning sun filtered through the leaves, casting a network of shadows on the campsite, Jake and Arya prepared for another day of joint efforts. Over a breakfast of synthesized grains and fruits, a mixture of their respective rations, Jake proposed their plan for the day. After we boost your communicator, we could scout for a better signal spot. There's a hill about a kilometer north that might give us a clear line, Jake suggested, cleaning up the small cooking area. That sounds like a practical idea, Arya agreed, her tone now much more comfortable around Jake. And perhaps, along the way, you could tell me more about Earth. I find your stories quite enlightening. Sure, it's a deal. And I'm curious about your homeworld, too, Jake said as he packed up their equipment. Learning about each other's homes seems to put things into perspective. They set out towards the hill, the terrain becoming rocky and uneven as they climbed. Jake led the way, finding the safest paths up the incline while Arya followed, using her newly repaired communicator to try and ping her own ship intermittently. So, what's the biggest misconception that your people have about us? Jake asked as they took a short break, looking out over the dense forest canopy stretching below them. Arya thought for a moment before answering. That humans are inherently destructive and selfish. My people believe that you only explore to exploit, not to understand or coexist. Jake nodded thoughtfully. It's funny, in a sad way. Some humans think the same about any alien species. Us versus them. It's an old story on Earth, too. They resumed their hike, reaching the summit where the trees thinned, providing a panoramic view of the surrounding planet. This is beautiful, Arya remarked, setting up her device. It is, Jake agreed, sitting down on a large rock. Earth has places like this, too. Mountains that make you feel like you're on top of the world. As Arya fiddled with her communicator, she found herself opening up more to Jake. On my world, I'm considered odd for wanting to explore, to leave our cities. Most of my kind prefer the safety and familiarity of our urban environments. That's not odd to me, Jake said, watching her with a smile. It's brave. Exploring the unknown is about the bravest thing I can think of. Arya smiled back, her communicator beeping successfully. I've got a signal. It's weak, but it's there. Great news. Let's set up a temporary relay. I have some gear that can boost it, Jake said, digging through his backpack for the necessary equipment. As they worked together to enhance the signal, Arya continued their exchange. What made you choose to be an explorer, Jake? My father was a pilot, and my mother was a scientist. I guess I inherited a bit of both their passions. Space seemed like the natural frontier for me, Jake explained, securing a makeshift antenna in place. Plus, I wanted to see if we really are alone in the universe. Turns out we're not, he added with a grin. Arya laughed, a sound that Jake was coming to enjoy. No, you're definitely not alone. With the communicator now capable of sending stronger signals, Arya sent a detailed status report back to her ship, hopeful for rescue, but also feeling a pang of sadness at the thought of leaving the strange camaraderie she'd found with Jake. Once they know you're safe, they'll come for you, Jake said, sensing her mixed emotions. Yes, but I'll take back so much more than I came with. I'll tell them about your kindness, your willingness to help a stranger from another world, Arya said, her eyes meeting his earnestly. And I'll have quite the story to tell about the courageous alien botanist who landed on Zalera Prime, Jake replied, his voice warm with admiration. Their laughter echoed off the hill, a sound of genuine connection that transcended worlds, a testament to what could be achieved when fear was set aside in favor of understanding and friendship. As they began their descent back to camp, both felt a profound shift in their journey, not just across the planet, but within themselves. The morning after establishing a stronger communication link, Jake and Arya found themselves more at ease with one another, their earlier reservations fading as the boundaries between them thinned. They decided to spend the day closer to the camp, working together to enhance Arya's scientific data with Jake's tools. Today I thought we could analyze the soil composition around here. It might help you with understanding the ecosystem's health, Jake suggested, handing Arya a sophisticated sensor from his collection. That would be extremely helpful, Arya responded, examining the sensor with keen interest. The minerals and organic content can tell us a lot about the planet's history. They set out with a clear plan, collecting soil samples from various marked points around the campsite. As they worked, the conversation flowed naturally. Did you always want to be an explorer, or was there something specific that pushed you towards it? Arya asked, carefully scooping up a sample of dark soil. Jake laughed lightly. I guess it was a bit of both. Growing up, I was fascinated by the stories of old Earth explorers, their journeys, the new worlds they documented. But when it came to choosing my path, it was the unknown that really pulled me in. What about you? Was it the science or the adventure that drew you to space? For me, it was the science at first. The adventure part was just a necessary part of the job, Arya explained, sealing a soil sample. But now, I think the adventure is growing on me, especially after meeting people like you. As they moved to another sampling site, their equipment beeped intermittently, analyzing the data on the go. They discussed potential implications of their findings, exchanging knowledge from their respective fields. This data could suggest that Zalera Prime is much younger geologically than we initially thought, Arya mused, looking over the readouts. Makes sense, given the volatility in the outer sectors. Maybe your findings could help prepare better colonization protocols, Jake added, jotting down some notes on his digital pad. The day progressed with scientific discussions, but as the sun began to set, their talk turned to more personal topics. You know, I've been thinking a lot about what you said about humans, Jake started, setting aside his pad. About us being destructive. I wish more people could see this, us, working together. Maybe it would change minds. Arya nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's the same for my people. Fear makes us assume the worst. But this, what we're doing now, it's a different kind of first contact. One that's about mutual respect. Exactly. It's about finding common ground, literally and metaphorically, Jake agreed, smiling. As they packed up their equipment, Jake proposed a small detour back to camp. There's a spot nearby with a great view of the sunset. It would be a perfect way to end the day. What do you say? Arya, intrigued by the idea, agreed. They found themselves on a small overlook, watching as the sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink. It's beautiful, Arya whispered, her eyes reflecting the vibrant colors. Yeah, it is, Jake agreed, glancing at her with a soft expression. Arya, Before he could finish, Arya turned to face him, her gaze intense but gentle. Jake, I want to thank you. Not just for today, but for all of it. You've shown me a different side of humanity. One that I never knew. Jake felt a warm rush of gratitude, realizing how much their time together had meant. And you've shown me that there's hope for a better understanding between our people. They stood in silence for a moment, appreciating the fading light and the rare peace it brought. As they walked back to the camp under the emerging stars, both felt a profound appreciation for the unexpected friendship they had forged. A friendship that had started with suspicion and had grown into something neither had anticipated. Back at the camp, under a sky speckled with stars, Jake prepared a simple yet comforting dinner using ingredients from both Earth and area supplies. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the sight. Ever tried a marshmallow? Jake asked, holding up a bag of fluffy white treats after they had finished eating. Arya looked puzzled. Marshmallow? It's a type of sweet treat from Earth. You roast them over a fire. Like this, Jake explained, skewering a couple of marshmallows on a stick and demonstrating over the flames. Intrigued, Arya followed his lead, watching as the marshmallow puffed up and turned golden brown. She tentatively tasted the gooey, melted sweet, and her eyes lit up with delight. That's incredibly sweet, she laughed, sticky fingers trying to manage the treat. It's a favorite camping tradition back on Earth, Jake smiled, pleased with her reaction. Simple pleasures, you know? As they enjoyed more marshmallows, the barrier of their formalities seemed to melt away just like the sweets. Feeling relaxed and at ease in the flickering firelight, Jake decided to delve deeper into their newfound camaraderie. Arya, can I ask you something personal? He ventured, his tone gentle. Curious, Arya nodded, her expression open. Of course, Jake. When you first arrived, you seemed really wary, almost afraid, despite your outward calm. What was going through your mind? Arya sighed, gazing into the fire. I was afraid, Jake. My training prepared me for hostility, for worst-case scenarios. My first thought upon meeting a human was not of friendship, but of potential threats. Jake nodded, understandingly. I get that. We're taught similar things. But you've come to see that's not always the case? Yes, very much so, Arya replied, turning to face him fully. Your kindness, your willingness to understand and help. It's changed my perspective significantly. Encouraged by her honesty, Jake felt a deeper connection forming, one that transcended their professional collaboration. That means a lot to hear, Arya. I think this experience, getting to know you, has changed me too, he admitted. I used to think these expeditions were just about the science, the discovery, but now I see it's also about the connections we make. Smiling warmly, Arya reached out, placing her hand gently over his. I'm glad it was you who found me, Jake. The contact was simple but charged with meaning, bridging their worlds with a touch. As they sat together, the night deepened, and a comfortable silence settled between them, filled with mutual understanding and respect. Eventually, Jake broke the silence with a lighter topic. So, Arya, seen any Earth movies? I brought some classics on my device. Could be a fun way to relax. Laughing, Arya nodded. I'd like that. It's another part of human culture I'm curious about. Setting up his portable viewer, Jake selected an old Earth classic known for its depiction of friendship and adventure. As they watched, they commented on the similarities and differences between their cultures, laughing and debating over fictional scenarios. The movie ended, but they continued talking late into the night, discussing everything from their favorite foods to their hopes for the future. It was a night of many firsts, marked by laughter and shared stories, and a deeper friendship that promised to last beyond their current circumstances. As they finally prepared to sleep, the distance between their worlds seemed insignificant, overshadowed by the close bond they had formed. The night's gentle breeze whispered through the trees, a soft accompaniment to the peaceful camaraderie that enveloped the camp. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery light over the campsite as Jake and Arya settled down after the long day of shared tasks and stories. The air was cool, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Jake stood by the fire, poking the embers to keep the warmth alive, while Arya lingered near her tent, her gaze wandering to the stars above. I never thought I'd feel so at ease in a place so far from home, Arya said softly, breaking the quiet. Jake looked up from the fire, catching her thoughtful expression. Funny, I feel the same. Even with all the places I've been, there's something different about this. About us. Arya turned to face him, her iridescent eyes reflecting the glow of the fire. It's strange. I was taught to fear humans, to expect cruelty or indifference at best. I was prepared for the worst when I met you. Jake's brow furrowed. You thought I'd hurt you? She nodded, her gaze softening. It's what I was told. That humans would exploit weakness, show no compassion. But, she paused, her voice dropping, you've shown me something else entirely. You've been patient, understanding, and kind. Jake walked over to her, standing close but not too close, his eyes searching hers. Arya, I could never hurt you. That's not who I am. I just wanted to help. And you have, more than you know, Arya whispered, her voice barely above a breath. She hesitated for a moment before stepping forward, closing the distance between them. You've given me something I didn't expect. Jake's heart raced as the air between them thickened with unspoken tension. His pulse quickened, but he kept his voice steady. What's that? Arya reached out, her fingers brushing his arm lightly, testing the waters of this new closeness. You've shown me that not everything is as my people said. You've shown me that I can trust you. And that means more to me than you could imagine. Jake's hand moved slowly to meet hers, his thumb tracing the delicate skin of her wrist. You can always trust me, Arya. For a long moment, they stood there, the quiet of the night surrounding them, their breaths sinking in the cool air. Arya's eyes searched his face, as if looking for any hint of doubt or hesitation, but she found none. Slowly, she moved closer, her head tilting slightly, her lips parting just a fraction. Jake leaned down, their faces mere inches apart, the air between them electric. The first touch of their lips was tentative, soft, testing the waters of this unfamiliar but undeniable connection. Arya's lips were warm, softer than Jake had imagined, and the gentle pressure of the kiss quickly deepened into something more urgent, more real. Her hands came up to rest on his chest, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt as Jake's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close. The fire crackled behind them, but the heat between them was far more intense. The kiss, once hesitant, became hungry, driven by the need that had been building for days between them. When they finally pulled apart, their breaths came fast, and their eyes locked, filled with an understanding that transcended words. Jake brushed a strand of Arya's hair away from her face, his touch lingering on her cheek. I didn't expect this, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Neither did I, Jake replied, his voice rough with emotion. But I'm glad it happened. Arya smiled, a rare and beautiful sight. You've shown me something I didn't think was possible. You've shown me pleasure, not pain. Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. She had expected something so different from him, cruelty, indifference, but instead, she had found compassion, care, and something even deeper. Without another word, Jake took her hand, leading her gently towards his tent. Inside, the small space felt intimate, the low hum of the wind outside acting as a quiet backdrop to their movements. They stood close again, their faces lit only by the faint glow of a portable lamp. This time, when they kissed, it wasn't tentative. It was filled with a need they both shared, a desire that had grown out of the trust they'd built together. Arya's hands slid up Jake's chest, exploring the feel of his body, while Jake's fingers traced the curves of her back, pulling her closer. They moved together naturally, their touches becoming more deliberate, more intense. As Jake's hands slid down her sides, Arya trembled, her breath catching in her throat. The sensation was new, unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. Far from it. She let out a soft gasp as Jake's lips moved from hers to her neck, kissing the delicate skin there, and her body responded instinctively, pressing against him. Every touch, every kiss felt like a discovery, a step into unknown but exhilarating territory. When they finally laid down together, it was with a shared understanding of what they both wanted. Their bodies moved in sync, slow at first, savoring each moment, each touch. Arya's skin was warm under Jake's hands, and the soft sounds she made as they explored each other sent shivers down his spine. Arya had expected pain, perhaps even suffering, but what she found instead was a tenderness she hadn't known was possible. Each kiss, each caress was filled with care, and the intensity of their connection grew with every passing moment. She trembled with pleasure as they moved together, their bodies entwined in a dance as old as time. Their lovemaking was slow, deliberate, and full of meaning. It wasn't just about physical pleasure. It was about the trust they had built, the bond they had forged despite the odds. As they finally lay together, breathless and spent, Jake held Arya close, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her skin. She rested her head on his chest, her breath still ragged, and whispered, "I expected torture, but you've shown me something I never thought possible." Jake kissed the top of her head, his heart full. "I'd never hurt you, Arya. I promise." In the quiet of the night, they lay together, wrapped in each other's arms, their fears and doubts fading into the background. For the first time, Arya felt truly safe, truly understood, and as sleep overtook them, she knew that whatever came next, she would face it without fear, because Jake was by her side. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a soft glow over the campsite. Jake was already awake, sitting just outside the tent with a cup of coffee in hand. The fire had long since died down, leaving only the scent of charred wood and the lingering warmth of the embers. Arya stirred inside the tent and emerged shortly after, rubbing her eyes as she stepped into the cool morning air. Her silver-blue skin shimmered in the soft light, a stark contrast to the human world she had come to know during her time here. "Morning," Jake greeted, his voice low and calm. "Good morning," Arya replied, her voice still groggy with sleep but carrying a gentle warmth. Jake handed her a cup of coffee. "You're getting used to this, I see," he said with a grin. Arya took a sip, smiling at the familiar bitterness. "It grows on you." They sat together in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the sunrise through the distant mountains. The quiet between them wasn't the tense uncertainty of the past, but something more serene. The events of the previous night had changed things between them in ways that neither of them could fully articulate. They had shared something profound, something real, and now they faced the quiet aftermath. "Any word from your ship?" Jake asked, finally breaking the silence. Arya shook her head. "Not yet, but I expect them soon. They'll come for me." Jake nodded, setting his cup down. "And then what? You go back to your people?" "I have to," Arya said softly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "My duty is to my people, to the research I was sent to do." "But," she trailed off, her thoughts seemingly far away. "But what?" Jake prompted gently. Arya sighed, turning to face him. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to explain this to them. What we've shared. They won't understand. They'll see it as a betrayal of everything we've been taught about humans." Jake leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees as he considered her words. "Do you think it has to be that way? Maybe you can change their minds." "Maybe," Arya said, her voice filled with uncertainty. "But change comes slowly, and the prejudices run deep. My people fear humans, and fear makes them blind." Jake frowned but didn't argue. He knew all too well how deeply ingrained fear and mistrust could be. "I get it, but maybe showing them the truth, our truth, could be a first step. You're not going back empty-handed." Arya smiled at that, though there was a sadness behind it. "You've given me more than I ever thought possible. You've shown me that what we fear is often what we don't understand." Jake reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing softly against her palm. "And you've shown me that not all aliens are out to get us," he said with a wry smile. "I never expected to meet someone like you out here. Hell, I never thought I'd care this much about someone from another world." She looked into his eyes, and for a moment, the weight of their shared experiences hung heavy between them. The reality that she would soon have to leave him was settling in, and neither of them knew how to bridge the gap that was coming. "We've made something here," Arya said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "Something real. I don't want to lose that." "You won't," Jake said firmly, his hand tightening around hers. "No matter where you go, What happens next? This. What we've had. No one can take that away from us. They sat there for a long time, hands intertwined, watching the sun climb higher into the sky. Eventually, Jake stood up, pulling Arya with him. Come on, he said. Let's make the most of today. There's still some work we can do while we wait for your ship. Arya nodded, grateful for the distraction. Together, they began organizing the samples they'd collected, carefully cataloging and analyzing the data. Jake set up the scanners, while Arya checked the readings, and they fell into a rhythm of easy conversation and work, just as they had in the days before. After a few hours, they finished with the samples, and Jake stepped back to admire the neat rows of containers. That's everything, I think, he said, wiping his hands on his pants. We're officially done. Arya smiled, though the completion of their work only reminded her that her time here was coming to an end. It feels strange to be finished. Yeah, it does, Jake agreed. But hey, you've got enough data to last you a lifetime, and enough memories to last even longer, Arya added, her voice soft. Jake's communicator buzzed, and he glanced at it, his expression growing serious. Looks like your ship's coming in soon. They've picked up your signal. Arya's heart tightened at the news, though she had known it was inevitable. I guess this is it. Jake stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. Arya, whatever happens next, just know that you've got a friend in me. No matter how far apart we are. She placed her hand over his, her fingers trembling slightly. And you and me, Jake. I'll never forget this. They stood in the clearing, waiting for the ship to arrive, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. When the distant hum of the ship's engines finally broke the silence, Arya turned to face him one last time, her eyes full of emotion. Goodbye, Jake, she whispered. Goodbye, Arya, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Take care out there. And with that, she boarded the ship, leaving behind the human who had shown her not just the beauty of his world, but the possibility of something far greater.